Have you ever been watching a video where someone is explaining how strong an anime character is, and everything they're saying makes sense, but out of nowhere, they bring up this one vague statement from some guidebook, which they form their entire argument around? It's so frustrating to me when people ignore the events of the series itself in favor of external guidebooks and interviews. If you've watched any of my power level videos, then you probably already know I'm not a fan of external material when deciding on how strong I think characters are. I go into this a little bit in those videos, but here I want to make one big video where I go over all of the clearly incorrect power levels from the Dragon Ball guidebooks. My goal here should be pretty clear. I'm just tired of hearing people using all of these guidebook stats, when if you actually critically analyze the series itself, it should be clear to anyone that these guidebook stats are nonsense. I should probably also mention, the author of Dragon Ball, Akira Toriyama, wasn't the type to get into this sort of thing, so I guarantee he had little to no involvement in any of these power level numbers. Of course, not everything from the guidebooks are wrong. Just like I do, someone working at Shonen Jump also probably analyzed the series and came to their own conclusions, and some of them are great, like the classic Super Saiyan multipliers. The guidebooks say Super Saiyan is 50 times stronger than the user's base, and in the series, we see Goku matching half of Frieza's power while receiving a 20 times Kaioken boost, so Super Saiyan would need to be more than double the times 20 Kaioken for Goku to beat Frieza. That would mean a 50 times multiplier is the most logical conclusion to come to, and I would agree with them. However, in contrast, the guidebooks have Kid Gohan at 2,800. That, of course, was a canon number that was stated in the series. However, it would be incorrect to say that that's Gohan's power level, as he only reached that number after receiving one of his Rage Boost power-ups, which have never been permanent. It's far more likely that Gohan's power level at the time was closer to 1,400, as most of his Rage Boosts are around 2 times stronger than his normal level. But technically, saying Gohan was at 2,800 isn't necessarily incorrect, as he was at that level at some point. So let me give you a better example. A very common opinion the community has is Nappa was around 4,000. This of course comes from the guidebooks. It's likely they came to this conclusion due to the scene where Vegeta warns Nappa that Goku had a resting power level of 5,000 as he approached. Since Nappa seemed surprised, that's why they put him at 4,000. However, I believe if you actually analyze Goku's encounter with Nappa, it should be obvious that this isn't the case. Goku powers up to over 8,000 before fighting Nappa, and despite this, after calming down, Nappa is able to hold his own, and Vegeta tells Nappa that it's not an unwinnable fight for him. I think this scene clearly shows that Nappa was closer to Goku's 8,000, more so than being around 4,000. Okay, so now that you hopefully see where I'm coming from, let's get into the data books. As we go, we'll discuss how accurate their levels are. Before we get into it, I'm on the road to surpass Saiyan Saga Vegeta's power of 18,000, so I'd really appreciate your support. Now, there are a few different official sources for these battle powers. The first was a page going over many characters in the 31st issue of Weekly Shonen Jump. This page is the main source of official power levels, and basically all of the stats here would make their way into the Daizenshu 7 years later. Then, 1 year after the original power level promo page, we got the Movie 3 Battle Power pamphlet. We will be talking about this one a lot, as it has by far the most incorrect information in it. And finally, the main source that people take somewhat seriously is the Daizenshu 7, that came out 6 years later. As I said, it seems like they derived all of their stats from that original promo page and added more around them. After that, the last thing to cover is the super exciting guide, where the iconic Super Saiyan multipliers came from. There are a few more minor sources, but I'm gonna stick to the main ones. Getting into it, I'll start with original Dragon Ball. They give start of series Goku a 10. I think these early Dragon Ball stats caused a lot of damage to the fan perception of power levels. When going about finding stats for the first half of the story, you basically need to fit everything between the normal human level of 5 and Goku's start of Dragon Ball Z level of 416. It frustrates me so much when people believe these numbers so strongly, because the people that came up with them probably put very little thought into it, and just vaguely fit all the characters between 5 and 416. The reason I think they're wrong is because the entire Dragon Ball Z story for the entire time power levels are relevant, they were always represented as linear. Like if you're a 10, you're twice as strong as a 5. But since Kid Goku is only a 10, people assume the levels aren't linear, as Kid Goku is definitely more than double the average guy in power. The community jumps through all of these hoops to justify the guidebook numbers, when I just think the guidebook is wrong, and Kid Goku should have started out way higher. By extension, since everything else is built upon that first Kid Goku stat, I think everything that follows is also wrong. At least, until the second World Tournament, as during said tournament, we get back on track, as the stats from then on are based upon the canon power level we got for Master Roshi at 139. Due to that, the Daizenshu numbers from the second tournament up to the start of Z can be taken much more seriously. While my own stats for that era are slightly different, they're not too far off. Well, there are a few issues still. The Shonen Jump promo page has King Piccolo above Kami, but if you read the Dragon Ball story, then you know it's stated in the series that Kami was stronger than Piccolo. Speaking of which, it's also stated Mr. Popo was weaker than Kami. Kami is at 220 here, so Mr. Popo must be lower, right? What the heck? 1030? How did they possibly overhype him this much? Let's just move on. But before that, we need to make fun of the movie 13 pamphlet, as it has a lot of stats for the pre-Z era of the story. So, we've established that a regular human is a 5, right? Well, let's take a look at our human level characters from Dragon Ball. Here, we get gems like every member of the Red Ribbon Army being in the hundreds. Who knew this random Colonel Goku one-shot was stronger than Master Roshi? Meanwhile, Emperor Pilaf is at 40. Bet you never realized Pilaf was 8 times stronger than the average man, did you? Or how Bulma, Oolong, Launch, and Puar are all at least double the average. Then, we get into the actually absurd stats. Like, despite us knowing Roshi's power level during Z was like 139, they have him at 350 for some reason. Or King Piccolo being at 500, despite Kid Goku beating him, who was obviously weaker than his adult version, who was only at 416. Or, my personal favorite, them putting Ox King at 900, which is insanely strong. So strong, in fact, he was apparently over 3 times stronger than King Piccolo, and when Raditz showed up, he would have given him a much better fight than Goku or Piccolo did. Meanwhile, in this huge sheet full of characters being overrated, they completely shaft Chaozu, who they only put at 130, while all of his friends get to be in the thousands. Chaozu was the weakest, sure, but he wasn't that much weaker. Come on, guys. Okay, now that that's out of the way, now we can assess the stats from Dragon Ball Z. We have lots of canon numbers here that are just stated in the series, and many of their estimates are pretty decent, so I'll just point out the ones that seem off. Starting with the puzzling decision to put Raditz at 1500. We know he was close to the power of a Cyberman, who was at 1200. It's possible Raditz was a little higher than them, but not that much higher. After that, most of the Z fighters seem pretty accurate, falling somewhere below Gohan's rage boosted level of 2800. Well, except Piccolo at 3500. Vegeta was pretty impressed by Gohan's power boost, so I find it pretty unlikely Piccolo is that much stronger. It makes way more sense to put Piccolo below 2800. Meanwhile, Chaozu continues to be disrespected, again. Yeah, he's the weakest, but why do people disrespect this man so much? He's probably way closer to the others than this. Meanwhile, back on the movie 3 pamphlet, it's like they intentionally chose the wrong numbers. Like Goku's over 8,000 is raised to 10,000 here, and Vegeta's later confirmed level of 18,000 is brought down to 16,000. These guys really think Yamcha is stronger than Tien, and for some reason they have Krillin significantly higher than both of them at 5,000. Keep in mind this is definitely Saiyan Saga Krillin, not Namek Saga, and above Krillin is Piccolo, who they put at 8,200. These are some pretty highball numbers for the Saiyan Saga, huh? Well, now we double back and we see that they still have Nappa around the 4,000s. I'm pretty sure Piccolo wasn't double Nappa in power during this arc, but maybe that's just me. Okay, that's enough movie 3 pamphlet for now. Back to the highly respected Daizenshu stats. We see Krillin and Gohan at 14 and 13,000 while on Namek. They likely came to this conclusion due to the Ginyu Force saying that their power was over 10,000. But once again, this is easily proven wrong, as the same Krillin is later shown easily beating up Ginyu in Goku's body, who was at 23,000, putting Krillin somewhere above 23,000, but below Vegeta's 30,000. I've heard people theorize that the Grand Elder's potential unlocking power doesn't happen all at once, and happens slowly over time, but this theory isn't supported by the series at all, and is just another excuse to explain the databook's clearly incorrect number. At the same time, this is the Gohan who had just had his potential unlocked by the Grand Elder as well, so it's unlikely Gohan was weaker than Krillin here. That's actually the end of the issues with the Daizenshu stats though, as I actually think they were spot on with Goku and Frieza, as everything checks out when compared to the series itself. Well, if we're done with that, it looks like it's time for more Movie 3 pamphlet. Zarbon, wrong. Kui, wrong. Dodoria, wrong. Cyberman, wrong. These are all characters who basically have confirmed levels in the series. I swear, it's like they're doing it on purpose. Finally, they put Frieza at 85,000, while he himself states in the manga that his power level was 530,000. This pamphlet also covers several of the early movie characters, but you can't trust anything from this pamphlet. Almost done now, but there's one more thing to cover. Like I mentioned earlier, the Super Exciting Guide has multipliers for the Super Saiyan transformations, as well as Potara fusion. As we discussed, 50 times for Super Saiyan just makes sense. But Super Saiyan 2 and 3 are a bit more shaky. From my time trying to scale the series myself, I came to the conclusion that there's a bit of wiggle room here. Basically, looking at Gohan's fight with Cell, it doesn't make sense for Super Saiyan 2 to be a 2x multiplier. This is because Cell was stronger than regular Super Saiyan Gohan, then got a Zenkai boost, but somehow Gohan was still stronger with only a 2x boost? I have two ways of explaining this. The first being that Super Saiyan 2 has to be closer to a 4x multiplier, while the second explanation would say Gohan was getting one of his rage boosts at the time as well. This implies Super Saiyan 2 is a 2x boost, but Gohan was getting another 2x boost at the same time, so it's a bit up for interpretation. But the databook isn't necessarily wrong here. Similarly, for Super Saiyan 3, the difference between Goku and Buu isn't 100% obvious, so you could actually put Super Saiyan 3 anywhere from 2x to 5x, depending on how strong Buu was. So the 4x they use here is fine. So luckily, our iconic Super Saiyan multipliers are somewhat safe from my wrath. Meanwhile, this is where the classic Potara multiplier of Goku times Vegeta came from. Nothing in the series actually contradicts this, so it could be true, but we know this isn't true for the Metamoran dance fusion, as if Gotenks was Goten times Trunks, then they would have easily destroyed Buu, with next to no effort. So under this assumption, the Potara earrings need to not just be better than the dance, but they need to be significantly better. Like, if the dance is a sword, the earrings are a nuclear bomb. And with that, we have successfully covered the guidebooks. In general, this sort of extended material is just a little extra bit of content for the fans, and can be lots of fun to go through. We just run into an issue when people wave around their guidebook stats like it's gospel. Things would be different if this was something like One Piece or Bleach, where the series creator is extremely passionate about every little detail, and personally approves all of the extended material. But Akira Toriyama just wasn't like that. Not to say he had zero involvement, but he wasn't one to get really into details in a guidebook. I think we should try not to get so attached to what we believe, closing ourselves off to the possibility of being wrong. You know, I've made my fair share of mistakes in my videos, but that only means I'm able to expand my knowledge with every mistake. I hope you're having a great day, and I'll see you next time.